Charlie Baker's recent trip to Washington to talk climate change was a national story with an irresistible plot. Here was a Republican governor urging members of his own party to grapple with a threat some of them don't even believe exists. Back in Massachusetts, though, the governor's legacy on climate change is still the subject of some debate. Adam Reilly has more.
In Massachusetts, climate change is not a partisan issue. While we sometimes disagree on specific policies, we understand the science and know the impacts are real because we're experiencing them firsthand.
Watching Governor Baker's congressional testimony a few weeks ago, Mass Audubon's Jack Clark was struck by how much Baker has changed in just a few years.
The governor decided that he would give us a talk using a whiteboard on the what climate change was all about, and I would say he was skeptical.
That was back in 2010 when Baker was challenging incumbent Deval Patrick. Afterward, Clark recalls,
we went back to our offices and said, we need to educate this guy.
Since then, Baker's gone from climate change skeptic to true believer. And Clark says he's governed accordingly, upping the use of renewable energy sources like wind and hydropower, and providing new funding to help cities and towns prepare for coastal flooding.
I would say Governor Baker has far exceeded expectations.
But when Andrea Honore read Baker's D.C. testimony, she had a very different take.
I broke my eye roll, honestly. Many of us were like, are you kidding me?
For the past 2 years, Honore's been staging an on-again, off-again lunchtime sit-in in Baker's office, trying to get him to oppose a new gas compressor station slated for this site in Weymouth. Honore and others say it'll be a safety risk with adverse local health effects, and a majority of the gas headed out of Massachusetts.
Over 50% of the gas that is slated to run through this is for export to Canada.
Baker hasn't endorsed or condemned the compressor. Instead, he said the state is doing its due diligence on what's ultimately a federal issue, which gets to a bigger frustration some environmental advocates have with the governor. While he decries the consequences of climate change, they say he's not aggressive enough when it comes to stopping it.
It's really puzzling why the governor would still be determined to expand fossil fuels in this state.
Ben Hellerstein with Environment Massachusetts says that ever since Baker took office, he's been a reliable supporter of new pipeline construction. Instead, Hellerstein argues Baker should be pushing for an aggressive transition to all renewable energy.
We've actually worked with legislators to file a bill that would get Massachusetts to 100% renewable electricity by 2035 and 100% renewables for other purposes like heating and transportation by 2045. The biggest statement that the governor could make in support of climate action would be to throw his support behind those targets.
Asked about that legislation, a Baker spokesman says the governor will carefully review any legislation that reaches his desk. Adam Reilly, WGBH News.
The spokesman also tells us the Baker-Polito administration invested over $609 million to address climate change mitigation and adaptation, secured the largest renewable energy procurements in state history, and maintained Massachusetts' position as the #1 state in the country for energy efficiency.